How did you know how to do that?
I've seen it done.
That's a field procedure, Claire. Where?
Please, doctor, just drop it.
Nurse Bennett, are you absolutely sure about this procedure?
There is no time, doctor. We must do this right now.
Monitor, then at the patient, realizing they were seconds away from losing her. But before anyone could stop her, a quiet nurse named Claire Bennett stepped forward, looked at the wound, and calmly reached for an instrument no one expected her to touch. What happened next would leave the entire trauma team speechless. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can change a person's life, if you believe everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes a story reaches us at exactly the moment we need it most. It was a cold November evening at St. Mary's Medical Center in Denver, Colorado, when the ambulance doors burst open. Paramedics rushed in with a critically injured woman who had been trapped inside a crushed vehicle after a highway collision. Her name was Grace Miller, a 32-year-old mother of two, and she was barely conscious. Blood covered the side of her clothing, and every second mattered. Dr. Thomas Whitaker, one of the most respected trauma surgeons in the hospital, immediately took command. Around him, nurses and residents moved with practiced urgency. Among them was Claire Bennett, a soft-spoken trauma nurse who had worked at St. Mary's for less than 8 months. Claire was the kind of person most people overlooked. She didn't talk loudly in meetings. She didn't compete for attention. She arrived early, stayed late, and rarely complained. Some doctors considered her overly cautious, while others barely remembered her name. But Claire had learned long ago that being unnoticed could sometimes be a strange kind of protection. She had spent years rebuilding her life after a past she never discussed. That night, however, her silence was about to end. Grace's condition deteriorated rapidly. The surgeons discovered internal bleeding that wasn't responding to the standard approach. Dr. Whitaker ordered additional blood, called for another surgical specialist, and began preparing for an emergency procedure. The room became a storm of movement. Monitors beeped, nurses called out numbers, instruments clattered against metal trays, and someone quietly prayed near the doorway. Claire watched everything. Then she noticed something nobody else had seen. The patient's breathing pattern changed. The monitor showed a subtle rhythm that suggested pressure was building somewhere it shouldn't. Claire remembered a technique she had once been taught under circumstances that had nothing to do with civilian medicine. She hesitated. She knew the procedure wasn't part of her normal authority. She knew that if she was wrong, her career could be over. But if she stayed silent, Grace might die. Claire leaned toward Dr. Whitaker and quietly explained what she had noticed. The chief surgeon initially dismissed the suggestion, believing the signs pointed toward a more familiar complication. But Claire didn't argue. She simply stood there, watching Grace's numbers fall. Then the monitor screamed again. Grace's heart rhythm became dangerously unstable. Dr. Whitaker shouted for the emergency team to prepare, but Claire moved first. With astonishing calm, she positioned herself beside the table and began directing the nurse beside her. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were focused. Every movement was deliberate. Dr. Whitaker suddenly stopped. He recognized what she was doing. It wasn't a procedure commonly taught to civilian trauma nurses. He watched Claire perform a sequence of actions with the confidence of someone who had practiced it hundreds of times. Within moments, the pressure began to change. The monitor responded. Grace's heart rhythm stabilized enough for the surgeons to continue. The room went silent for half a second. Then everyone moved again. 20 minutes later, Grace was alive. She wasn't safe yet, but she had been given a chance. Dr. Whitaker removed his surgical gloves and stared across the room at Claire. There was no anger in his face anymore. There was something else, confusion, curiosity, and perhaps a little fear. He asked her, "Who taught you that procedure?" Claire looked down. For the first time that night, the confident expression disappeared from her face. Her fingers began trembling slightly. She whispered, "Task Force 160. Nobody spoke. The name hung in the room like a secret that had suddenly been dragged into the light. Dr. Whitaker had heard the name before. He knew enough to understand that Claire's answer opened a door into a past she had clearly tried to keep closed. He asked her where she had learned it, but Claire didn't answer immediately. She simply looked through the glass window toward the recovery room where Grace was being treated. Then she said something that changed the way everyone in that room saw her. "I learned it because someone I loved needed me to know it." Claire had grown up in a small town in North Carolina. Her father, Michael Bennett, had been a military helicopter pilot. To Claire, he had never been a hero from a television screen. He was simply the father who made pancakes on Sunday mornings, fixed broken bicycles, and taught her never to walk away from someone who was hurting. When Claire was 19, her father died during a mission. The official details were never something Claire discussed. What remained with her was a notebook he had left behind, filled with medical notes, emergency techniques, handwritten reminders, and lessons about keeping calm when everyone else was afraid. After his death, Claire joined a medical training program. She wanted to become a physician, but life didn't cooperate. Her mother became ill. Bills piled up. Claire eventually became a nurse instead, telling herself that helping people was enough. But there was another reason she stayed in nursing. She was terrified of becoming attached to anyone. Every time a patient died, Claire felt as though she was losing her father all over again. So she built walls. She became quiet. She became dependable. And she stopped allowing people to get close. Dr. Whitaker listened without interrupting. Then he told her something she had never expected to hear from him. "You saved her life." Claire shook her head and said the surgeons had saved Grace. Dr. Whitaker looked at her and replied that medicine was never about one person. It was about recognizing the moment when another human being needed you to act. That sentence broke something inside Claire. For years, she had believed her past was a burden she needed to hide. She thought the strange skills she had learned had no place in her new life. She believed being different meant she didn't belong. But that night, her past had become the reason a mother was still alive. Hours later, Grace's husband, Nathan Miller, sat beside her hospital bed holding her hand. Their 2 young children were asleep with their grandmother in the waiting room. Nathan had been told that his wife had come dangerously close to death. He didn't know Claire's name. He didn't know what she had done. He only knew that his wife was breathing. The next morning, he found Claire in the hallway. Nathan didn't give her a dramatic speech. He simply walked toward her, placed both hands around hers, and said that his children still had a mother because someone had refused to give up. Claire tried to remain composed. She failed. Tears rolled down her face. Nathan hugged her. And for the first time in years, Claire allowed herself to be comforted by a stranger. That moment changed her more than any promotion ever could. Weeks passed, and Grace slowly recovered. She eventually walked out of St. Mary's Medical Center with her family beside her. Before leaving, she asked to meet the nurse who had helped save her. Claire entered the room expecting gratitude. Instead, Grace reached for her hand and said that she had spent her entire life believing heroes were extraordinary people who did extraordinary things. Then she smiled and told Claire that sometimes a hero was simply an ordinary person who decided not to look away. Claire couldn't answer. She just held Grace's hand. Years later, Claire would become one of the most respected trauma nurses at St. Mary's. She began teaching younger nurses the most important lesson she had learned from her father: knowledge means very little if fear prevents you from using it when someone needs you. She never stopped remembering that night. She never stopped remembering Grace. And she never stopped carrying her father's old notebook. But she no longer carried it as a reminder of loss. She carried it as a reminder that love can survive even when the person we love is gone. Sometimes, the hardest chapter of our life secretly prepares us for the moment someone else needs us most. Claire thought her past had ruined her future. She eventually discovered that her past had given her the courage to save someone else's. And perhaps that's what second chances really are, not becoming a completely different person, but finally understanding why you survived everything you did. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach people who may need a little hope today. Before we end, comment, "Kindness saves lives," if you believe that one person's courage and compassion can change another person's destiny.